Fred still here in the Caribbean, now a tropical depression, but expected to return to tropical storm status ahead of emerging here in the Gulf of Mexico near Florida, perhaps up Florida's Gulf Coast. The latest track plus a meteorologist Q&A starts now here on Tracking the Tropics. Hey there, folks. JB Biunno here with you live once again in your hurricane headquarters. Great to have back on the program News Nation Chief Meteorologist Albert Ramon there on the right side of your screen. We have the latest models, the latest track to get to here. The NHC just dropping their 11 a.m. Eastern advisory here just moments ago. We're going to get to that here with meteorologist Amanda Holly for just a second, but want to let you know, Fred, now a tropical depression, really just falling apart over Hispaniola over the last 12 or so hours. And we do expect a re-strengthening here, Albert, at some point. But right now, this storm looks absolutely awful. Not really something to worry about now, but perhaps something to worry about here this weekend.
Yeah, Fred's having a bad morning, a combination of land interaction with Haiti and the Dominican Republic, wind shear. We'll talk about what that is coming up. But you're right. This looks to be a big rainmaker for parts of the state of Florida this upcoming weekend. We'll get into that.
Not really all that impressive on radar, but what could happen here in the hours and days ahead? Of course, we're going to get to your questions and comments using hashtag HeyAlbert, hashtag HeyJB, or hashtag HeyAmanda for Tracking the Tropics. Meteorologist Amanda Holly standing by. That 11 a.m. advisory, Amanda, just in as of a moment ago.
Yeah, and it's not anything that we really didn't expect. We've been keeping an eye on infrared satellite, the water vapor loop all morning long, and really Fred is struggling, and that's an understatement at this point. So we've got Fred right here passing through the Caribbean. We're also keeping an eye on Invest 95L out in the Atlantic. That is going to take a very similar path to what Fred is taking, and we may be talking about that one this time next week. But for now, we'll focus on tropical depression Fred, the very mountainous island terrain here of the Dominican Republic, did its job. I mean, the mountains really tore this storm apart. You can see when we look at infrared satellite, this is where the center of the storm should be, but all of the shower and thunderstorm activity well off to the east. I mean, there's showers and thunderstorms still situated over the Dominican Republic, not even really over Haiti, where it's closer to the center of the storm. Even the National Hurricane Center, where hurricane hunters were just in the storm for several hours this morning, they said the strongest winds are actually being reported in these thunderstorms over the Bahamas, well far away from the center. So at the very least, this storm is struggling. We do see a little bit of a swirl with these clouds, but there's hardly any rain associated with the center of this storm at this point. And we expect it to stay that way for several more hours, if not about a day and a half. We're going to be talking about a depression, so you may not be as alarmed as you were maybe at the beginning of the week, but we are expecting it to re-strengthen back into at least a tropical storm. Now, it's going to take this path very close to Cuba, which also has some mountain ranges. It's also going to be impacted by that wind shear, the stronger upper level winds kind of keeping it, not allowing it to reorganize here. But notice as it gets into the Florida Straits and then as it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, that's when we're going to be talking about it strengthening up just a bit. So 8 a.m. Saturday, this is when I expect the South Florida area, including the Florida Keys, to really be impacted by tropical depression or tropical storm Fred. Right now, the intensity forecast has it at about a 40-mile-per-hour tropical storm. So a low-grade tropical storm with those gusty tropical rain bands moving through. But this is kind of what I wanted to focus on at this point as it kind of nears the Florida's west coast and then possibly in the Florida Panhandle. The spaghetti models that we always talk about, they're in pretty good agreement at this point that the storm is going to be within this cone as we get into Saturday, Sunday, and into Monday. This line right here represents the 8 a.m. Sunday line with, if the center of the storm is just off of Florida's west coast line here, could be talking about a little bit stronger of a tropical storm, wind speeds of 50 miles per hour. Now, I will say if the center of the storm is maybe closer to the outside of the cone here, we could be talking about maybe a bit stronger of a tropical storm, possibly even a weak Category 1 storm, Category 1 hurricane, because it would have more warm water to feed off of. On the other hand, if we were to be talking about the center of the storm maybe on the eastern side of this cone, which is still possible, we'd be talking about a much weaker storm, much less impacts to at least the peninsula of Florida. But it does look like it will continue to strengthen as it makes its way toward the Florida Panhandle Sunday night and into early Monday morning. This icon here is a little bit deceiving because it's already over land. So 8 a.m. Monday morning, the official forecast is for it to be a 60-mile-per-hour strong tropical storm. But I do think that it will be a little bit stronger approaching this coastline because it'll be stronger as it approaches and then start to weaken as it makes its way ashore. So a little bit deceiving here. I do think we'll be talking about a stronger tropical storm, if not a weak Category 1 hurricane, as it approaches the Florida Panhandle late Sunday night and into early Monday morning. So certainly something to still keep an eye on here, even though Fred looks very unimpressive at this point on this Thursday morning. But that's the latest track. We just got it in from the National Hurricane Center. In fact, they waited till the very last few minutes to update us here. The 11 a.m. update came in right at 11 a.m. The forecast models, again, pretty good agreement that it's going to stay just to the north of that northern Cuba coastline here, and then it takes that turn off to the north, again, following the subtropical high pressure, the Bermuda high pressure that we call it. It's going to round the edge of it. But again, these are in fairly good agreement, if you will, but it will make all the difference which line this takes, if you will, of what impacts the Tampa Bay area seas and what impacts the peninsula seas, because again, a track farther out into the Gulf of Mexico will likely lead to a bit stronger of a storm. Tropical moisture, very unimpressive at this point. You can see there's really not even any deep tropical moisture associated with the center of the storm, which is about right here. All of it's way off to the east. It has fended off the dry air a bit better, but very unimpressive this morning. One thing it does have going for it are those warm tropical waters. Plenty of warm water for this thing to get going again as we get into late Friday, Saturday, and into Sunday. Plenty of warm water that will then translate into energy for Fred to re-strengthen. Now, max event rate radar locally here in Tampa Bay, not tracking anything right now, but I guarantee you it will be a useful tool on Sunday when Fred kind of nears our coastline and we'll be tracking some of those tropical rain bands coming through. It could also be useful in about a week's time from now when we're tracking Invest 95L has a 60% chance of developing over the next 5 days. That's something we're going to keep our eye on. For now, though, guys, Fred is we've got our eyes on an unimpressive Fred this morning. Yeah, and we're going to activate now the Meteorologist Q&A here, folks. For those of you who have been with us here before on Tracking the Tropics, you can use any of the hashtags that we have here for our meteorologists. Albert Ramon joining us from Chicago News Nation. If you haven't seen him on News Nation, definitely worth a watch, folks. Of course, joining us this morning for this Thursday morning edition of Tracking the Tropics. Use hashtag Hey Albert, hashtag Hey Amanda, or hashtag Hey JB, and we'll get to your Facebook Live comments that are coming in. But Albert, your thoughts here. This has been kind of an up and down sort of week. There were those earlier days this week where we were right there on the cusp of this storm becoming tropical storm Fred, and then now we're here downgraded. Now we're talking about it perhaps re-strengthening here. What's your analysis of this system? Yeah, and the Tracking the Tropics meteorologists over the last couple of days, they nailed it on the head. They said that, yes, it was a tropical storm a day ago, but it would be interacting with a higher terrain of Hispaniola. It would be dealing with wind shear, and it would weaken. So the forecast has actually worked out really nice. What is interesting is in the 11 a.m. update, just about 14 minutes ago, Hurricane Center is saying that the hurricane hunters barely found a closed circulation. They say that this more resembles an open wave. This is something that we would keep an eye on if it was out in the Atlantic. But one thing to just remember is over the next 36 hours, it will be moving into a more favorable area for development. Amanda showed you the seawater temperatures from the Florida Strait and then into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. We've got mid to upper 80 water temperatures. And the environment, when it comes to wind shear, those are winds above the surface aloft. Those are going to start to settle down. So that's why the official forecast cone, as you see right now, has this once again being upgraded to a tropical storm. So it's something to watch. I think the headline also out of the 11 a.m. update is that there are tropical storm watches in place for the Southeast Bahamas, but we may see tropical storm watches posted as early as this afternoon. Maybe the 5 o'clock Eastern update for portions of South Florida. That includes Miami area and also the Keys.
Albert Ramon joining us from Chicago here. We also have Tracking the Tropics meteorologist Amanda Holly now back here with us to answer your questions here out of the Facebook Live comment section, just on social media. Use hashtag Hey Albert, hashtag Hey Amanda, hashtag Hey JB. Brian here asking, I'll bring you guys both in for this one. Hashtag Hey Amanda. Does it seem odd that most of the storms this year are riding our west coast? Brian joining us here from Florida. So talking about Florida's west coast here. From my understanding, for our coast to get hit like this is not typical. Is that true, Amanda?
Kind of just depends on really the atmospheric setup. So a lot of these storms will kind of ride on the southern periphery of that Bermuda high pressure that we always talk about, and then it will turn to the right. Depending on the strength of that high pressure, that's what makes the turn. So if the high pressure is really strong and extends well out into the Gulf of Mexico, you're not going to see that turn happen until maybe Texas or Louisiana, like we saw multiple times last year. If it's a little bit weaker, like it is right now, we're going to see that turn happen a little bit sooner, possibly into Florida's coast. There's several other factors too, Albert, at play.
Yeah, and the big question with Fred is exactly when is that turn going to happen? A lot of the model guidance, you showed the spaghetti models, a lot of them are more off towards the west than the official forecast cone. I don't know if you noticed that the forecast cone is a bit more to the east of where the guidance is. So there is still some question on exactly when that turn happens, when that turn to the north happens. And a lot of that depends on exactly right, the high pressure that's out in the central Atlantic. If the high weakens a little bit earlier, this is going to ride up right along the peninsula. And at the end of the day, it is going to be a weaker system. Rainmaker, yes, but a weaker system because of more land interaction across the peninsula of Florida. If that high was a little bit stronger, and you see on the spaghetti models here, and if it was a little bit more off towards the west, over the warmer waters of the eastern Gulf of Mexico, that's when we got to watch out for this to be maybe a 60-mile-per-hour tropical storm, as the official forecast shows. So there's still some uncertainty on exactly when that turn is going to happen. I think bottom line, though, Amanda, I don't know if you agree on this, but the main impact at this point is going to be rainfall. And some places in southeast Florida could see upwards of 6 inches of rainfall out of this one.
Yeah, it's a tropical system, so it's going to bring in tropical moisture. It's going to tap into that really warm water and dump maybe 4 to 6 inches of rainfall in a good swath, and then localized amounts even higher than that. So we're certainly going to have to watch for that localized flooding, especially here in the Tampa Bay area, where like right along the coastline the past couple of days, we've seen inches of rain just in our normal everyday thunderstorms. So certainly some saturated grounds here, and we'll be watching for that localized flooding.
What's interesting about the current, Facebook Live audience that we have here now is that the casual viewer has checked out for now. For the most part, I would say that the most casual viewers have really checked out on the system because, especially if you're here in Florida, a tropical depression east of Cuba, it's just not really, pun not intended, on your radar just yet. But we do have a lot of great questions coming in, a lot of great questions from what we call our Tracking the Tropics super fans out there. And again, you can use any of the hashtags on your screen, hashtag Hey Amanda, hashtag Hey Albert, hashtag Hey JB, and we can feature your comment here on screen. Maybe you have a question while we're talking here about, the Atlantic hurricane season. Carrie here asking, hashtag Hey Amanda, if the NHC determines that the center is actually north of where they thought it'd be, does that mean the models could shift? Aren't the models fed data based on the current position? Again, I'll bring you guys both up here to answer this one from Carrie joining us here in our Facebook Live comment section.
It's a great question, Carrie. Yeah, if we have a very weak, disorganized system that it's really hard to tell the position of the exact center, yeah, the models are going to be a little bit confused, and then that's going to translate to long-run uncertainty as well. So when we have disorganized systems like this, it always leads to a little bit more uncertainty in the long run because the models are confused as well. Just like it's, we look at the surface analysis maps, we look at the data from the hurricane hunters that were just in there, and as Albert, you just said, they had a hard time finding the center. So if we can't find the center with actual data, the models are going to be a little bit more confused as well.
Yeah, and let's not confuse the position of where the hurricane center puts it. Where you see the L right now, that's the official position of where the hurricane hunters found that very, very weak center of circulation. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes the models initialize differently. Maybe it's to the south, maybe it's to the north of where the actual center is. And you're absolutely correct. Long-term impacts on exactly where it turns and the eventual impacts of where it ends up along the peninsula or even the panhandle of Florida, that can get real jumbled. And that's why you have meteorologists like us to kind of keep an eye on it and tell you, well, here's what we think is going to happen. And of course, our friends at the Hurricane Center as well.
We got another question coming in here, everybody. It's loading up here now, and it comes from, of course, the Tracking the Tropics Facebook Live comment section, where you can use any of the hashtags on your screen to ask a question to one of our great meteorologists on the program. Hayden here asking, hashtag, hey Amanda, I ask this every time there's a new storm, how far can the storm surge come in for this storm? And is it possible to strengthen to a Cat 1 or a Cat 2 like Elsa?
So storm surge is very dependent on location, and where you are in relation to the storm as well. It depends on the shape of the coastline, kind of what's underneath the water, the actual ocean floor, how fast does it come up to the land. If it's a very gradual, coming up from the deeper ocean depths, you're going to see more of a storm surge versus if it was a very deep area that came up really, really fast. So it all depends on exactly your location. And to answer your other question about it possibly being a Cat 1, Cat 2, intensity forecast notoriously hard to predict. And with this one in particular, it's weak right now, but how much of that warm water is it really going to tap into? How weak are the winds actually going to get in the upper levels of the atmosphere? There's some model differences there. The European suggests that the wind shear will actually stay a little bit higher, and the GFS saying the wind shear is going to weaken a bit more, possibly leading to a stronger storm. And these models in particular, they're going back and forth as well. So all of these things kind of play into that, but I always say at least plan for a category above or a category below.
So you see the spaghetti models, right? You see all individual models. We also get to see those models show us an intensity forecast, what they think is going to happen over the coming days. None of the models as of this morning are showing this reaching hurricane strength. So you think, all right, good news. But as JB and Amanda know better than anyone working out of the Tampa area, the eastern Gulf of Mexico, for some reason, is a wild card. So if this takes a slower turn to the north and the center of circulation gets out in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, where we have seawater temperatures mid to upper 80s, that could change that intensity forecast in a big way. So even though the data as of now is saying, we think this tropical storm at best, let's see what happens as we get towards this weekend and find out where the center of circulation is going to land, because more water time that the system has, the better chance that this is going to be a stronger system. But the good news this morning, as of now, we don't expect this to become a hurricane.
And we've talked about this on other editions of Tracking the Tropics to Albert and Amanda here about how we've really seen there to be significant improvements in the track forecast. And really, we've seen now this track really form a consensus, as you guys have been talking about the spaghetti models over the last 48 hours, especially. Amanda noting that there is sometimes a bit of a lack of certainty with the intensity forecast. Amanda, I remember when you talked about the advancements in the GFS model in advance of this hurricane season in our hurricane special. So is there any higher hope for perhaps a more accurate intensity forecast with this system and the remaining systems that we're going to have over the course of the Atlantic hurricane season this year, just because we have advancements in technology? And perhaps I can answer that question to both of you here.
Yeah, I'll say that I talked to several of the folks at the National Hurricane Center about the advancements with the GFS. They continuously work on the intensity forecast. They continuously work on forecasting rapid intensification. That's even harder to forecast than the intensity forecast itself. Yes, we should see a little bit of an improvement in the intensity forecast, but the track has been, we've already seen it this year with Elsa. It outperformed the European model from day one with Elsa. Right. So we've already seen significant improvements in the GFS with the storms that have formed this year. So I have high hopes going forward.
Me too. You're absolutely right. Yeah, the track forecast has been really good this year. And even going back to the last several years, I was in Texas when Hurricane Harvey hit the middle Texas coast. And we all remember how pretty great the timing and also the track of Harvey was, but terrible intensity, right? None of the models at the time thought that was going to be a Cat 4 hurricane. So intensity forecast, high hopes that the new upgrade to the GFS model is going to do better on that this coming season. And before we went on live, we were talking about how Fred is kind of a warm up. We're still in kind of, we're in the middle of hurricane season, but preseason of what we think is going to be an active second half of the season into this month and especially into next month. Of course, climatology speaking, September 10th is the peak of hurricane season. So we know that it's going to be active even in any normal year, but this appears not to be a normal year. Maybe not as intense as last year when we had 30 named storms, but the official forecast from the Hurricane Center is saying 20 named storms, including the 6 that we have right now. So we've got a long ways to go, and don't let systems like Fred, even though it looks pathetic on satellite right now, make you put your guard down. This may be just a rainstorm for many of you in the state of Florida, but the one behind it, where does that one go? What are the impacts of that one? And of course, the systems that haven't even developed yet on this Western African monsoon, they'll be watching in the weeks to come. So let this all just be a good reminder, especially if you live in Gulf states or East Coast states, of, do I have a plan ready to go? Not going to need to board up for this one. It doesn't appear. Not going to have to any kind of evacuations with this one, it appears. But the next one, or the one, a few weeks from now, that we'll probably have to initialize some of those safety measures. So this is just kind of a good reminder that, hey, we're in the middle of hurricane season. We still got a long way to go.
News Nation Chief Meteorologist Albert Ramon joining us here, everybody. Albert, before we let you go, what are you going to be looking for in the hours, days ahead here as we continue to track tropical depression and likely eventually tropical storm Fred once again?
I'm not going to really be focusing on too much about the next day and a half. I don't think a lot's going to change with the system in the next day and a half. And you see the Hurricane Center doesn't think so either. I think by the time we head into Saturday morning, when we start to see some tropical storm impacts to South Florida, and the center circulation is over the Florida Strait, and the water's a little bit better, the wind shear is not as much. And if this system were to jog a little bit more off towards the west, and it was more in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, Saturday afternoon into Saturday night, that's when you kind of want to pay attention. Okay, how strong is this thing going to get? Now, if it's a little bit more due south of the peninsula, and it's going to ride up northward along the peninsula, a lot of land interaction, probably not going to see a whole lot of major impacts in terms of wind and surge. But the rain, again, at the end of the day, is going to be the big deal for the system this week and into early next week. But our friends in Florida, they're used to that. So it's just plan on a rainy weekend, huh?
Yeah, catch Albert Ramon, folks, here. Keeps it real on News Nation for all the folks that, of course, been following News Nation. Great programming, of course, that we've been talking about here. Going back to last time that we had Albert on, I believe was last summer, right when they were getting ready for the launch of News Nation. Real quick, Albert, when can viewers find you there?
So we start at 6 p.m. Eastern every weekday with a rush hour. I do weather updates. We'll talk about Fred during our rush hour program, 5 o'clock Central, 6 o'clock Eastern time. And then I make appearances as needed on our 9 o'clock Eastern show, News Nation Prime. So catch us every weeknight. And of course, we got 2 hours of news programming during the weekend as well.
Also follow him, of course, on social media, Albert Ramon TV on Twitter included. Albert joining us here, everybody, on this Thursday morning edition of Tracking the Tropics. Great to have him. Watch him on News Nation. You can watch Amanda and myself, and, of course, the rest of the meteorologists that make up the Tracking the Tropics team across the country. Meteorologists just like Albert joining us here on our updates when we talk about, of course, tropical storms that form here in the Atlantic hurricane season, hurricanes, of course, as well. So we'll have additional updates in the hours, days ahead here on Tracking the Tropics to keep you posted on everything going on with tropical depression Fred. Right now, again, as Amanda put it, extremely unimpressive at this time, but we're kind of keeping a cautious eye on where Fred kind of goes and how strong Fred becomes here in the hours and days ahead. For Chief Meteorologist Albert Ramon, Meteorologist Amanda Holly, I'm JB Biunno. We'll see you for the next update here on Tropical Depression Fred here on Tracking the Tropics.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.